It looks less like a studio tool than a piece of scientific machinery. A steel chassis, glowing valves, transformers heavy enough to punish a rack, and a meter that moves backward as the signal grows louder. Built at the end of the 1950s, the Fairchild 660 and 670 can now cost more than a car. But their value is not just scarcity. It begins with a problem every recording engineer knows. How do you control sound without draining the life from it? Fairchild was not the first compressor, and it was not the first limiter. Radio networks, film sound departments, telephone systems, and disc-cutting rooms had used automatic level control for years. Their practical need was urgent. A sudden peak could overmodulate a transmitter, overload a recording chain, or drive a cutting stylus beyond a safe excursion. Existing devices could protect the system, but protection often arrived with pumping, distortion, noise, or an audible thump when gain changed. Early variable mu circuits offered a promising answer. In a remote cutoff valve, changing the control grid voltage changes the valve's effective gain. The same active device can therefore amplify quiet passages and reduce louder ones. Yet the control signal must be fast, stable, and smooth. Too slow, and a transient escapes. Too abrupt, and the cure becomes audible. The breakthrough was not simply using a variable mu valve. It was building an entire control system that could react quickly and then recover according to the behavior of the program. At the center of the story was Rein Narma, an Estonian-born engineer whose post-war career crossed military and professional recording work before he settled in New York. Contemporary accounts describe an unusually practical designer. He understood circuits, but he also understood what failed in real sessions. Narma worked around Gotham Recording and built specialized equipment for engineers and studios. Among the people who sought his help was Les Paul, already famous not only as a guitarist, but as a relentless experimenter with sound-on-sound and multi-track recording. The Audio Engineering Society archive documents the collaboration clearly. When Les Paul's 1-inch 8-track Ampex machine arrived, it needed a console and supporting electronics worthy of the idea. Rein Narma Audio Engineering built an 8-input, 3-output custom desk. Photographs taken in 1958 show the console, the tape machines, and a Narma compressor mounted in the equipment rack. This was not a product dreamed up by a marketing department. It grew beside a working recording system, where speed, noise, headroom, and musical consequences were impossible to ignore. The exact path from that custom compressor to the commercial Fairchild line is sometimes retold with more certainty than the surviving evidence allows. The broad outline is consistent. Les Paul wanted better level control. Narma developed the limiter. Sherman Fairchild learned of the work, licensed the design, and brought Narma into Fairchild recording equipment as chief engineer. There, an experimental solution could become a manufactured instrument. In 1959, the mono Model 660 and the stereo Model 670 entered professional audio history. The 660 was the focused version, one channel, built for mono recording, broadcast chains, and disc mastering. Its front panel looked simple. Input gain, threshold, a 6-position time constant switch, metering, and calibration controls. But the simplicity was deceptive. The input control determined how hard the circuit was driven. Threshold shaped wear, and how strongly gain reduction began. Together, they moved the unit from gentle compression toward firm limiting, while the meter showed how much level the amplifier was taking away. Unlike a modern compressor with separate ratio, attack, release, and knee knobs, the Fairchild's behavior emerged from interacting controls and the nonlinear characteristics of its valves. The original literature described a continuously changing compression slope, from nearly 1-to-1 toward heavy limiting. That is why a single setting can feel restrained on moderate passages and become far more assertive on peaks. Engineers were not dialing an abstract ratio. They were choosing how the whole amplifier would respond to the performance in front of it. The 670 expanded the concept into 2 channels, but calling it merely 2 660s in one box misses its purpose. Stereo records were becoming commercially important, and mastering engineers needed level control that would not make the image wander. A peak on only one side could cause an independent limiter to pull that side backward. The 670 added carefully arranged stereo operation so the engineer could manage 2 channels while preserving the geometry of the recording. In left-right mode, the chassis operated as 2 independent limiters. In vertical-lateral mode, an internal matrix converted the stereo pair into sum and difference components, the language used by stereo disc cutting, and a close ancestor of what engineers now call mid-side processing. The center information and the side information could be controlled separately, then reconstructed into left and right. The manual specified 60 decibels of separation in left-right operation and 40 in vertical-lateral mode. The engineering cost of that elegance was enormous. The original manual lists 20 valves in the 670, including 8 Type 63D6 remote cutoff control tubes, plus a regulated power supply and substantial output stages. The chassis occupied 14 inches of rack panel height, extended 11 inches behind the panel, and weighed approximately 65 pounds. It drew up to 3 amps from the mains and required at least half an hour of warm-up before calibration. This was studio infrastructure, not a portable accessory. At its heart, the audio path is a balanced push-pull valve amplifier. A separate sidechain watches the signal, converts level into a control voltage, and applies that voltage to the grids of the variable mu tubes. As level rises, their gain falls. Because matched tubes work symmetrically, unwanted control artifacts can cancel instead of appearing as a thump in the audio. Transformers provide balancing, isolation, and part of the electrical environment in which the circuit operates. What listeners call color is the sum of all these stages under changing level, not one magic component. The time constant switch was the other major idea. According to the manual, positions 1 and 2 attack in 0.2 of a millisecond, then release in 0.3 or 0.8 seconds. Positions 3 and 4 slow the attack to 0.4 of a millisecond and release over 2 or 5 seconds. Positions 5 and 6 are program dependent. A lone transient can recover quickly. Repeated peaks hold the gain down for about 10 seconds, and sustained high level in position 6 can extend recovery toward 25 seconds. That program-dependent release explains much of the Fairchild's reputation. A fixed fast release can exaggerate low-frequency cycles and make the background surge between peaks. A fixed slow release can leave the next phrase needlessly suppressed. The automatic curves try to separate a momentary transient from a sustained passage. They are not intelligent in the modern digital sense. They are networks of resistors and capacitors responding to stored control voltage. But to an engineer in 1959, the behavior could seem uncannily aware of the music. In use, the Fairchild could be almost invisible or unmistakably dramatic. A mastering engineer might ask it to catch only the highest peaks. A recording engineer might drive the input harder so the valves and transformers became part of the tone. Vocals could gain density without losing every breath. Bass could remain present. Room microphones and drums could acquire a long, breathing movement. On a mix, slow recovery could hold the image together. None of these results came from a universal preset. They came from level, threshold, time constant, and the source itself. Abbey Road provides one of the strongest documented examples. The studio says its original 660s were purchased after engineer Peter Bown heard the devices at Capitol Records. They became rare pieces of non-EMI equipment inside Abbey Road, and were used on Beatles recordings, including drum and vocal work. The studio still maintains original 1960s units. Claims about a Fairchild on a specific song or exact track should still be checked session by session, but its broader place in the Abbey Road sound is not a myth. Why are originals so scarce and expensive? Production belonged to a tiny professional market. Every chassis demanded labor-intensive point-to-point wiring, custom magnetics, selected tubes, calibration, heat management, and maintenance. Decades later, matched 63D6 tubes are difficult to source, transformers age, capacitors drift, and restoration requires specialized knowledge. Surviving units also carry provenance. They are working artifacts from the rise of stereo recording. Auction and dealer prices vary wildly, so any single number dates quickly, but clean serviced examples routinely occupy the territory of serious collector equipment. The legacy is larger than the surviving hardware. Modern builders reproduce the topology with newly wound transformers, substitute valves, or expanded controls. Software developers model the gain curve, time constants, transformer response, saturation, noise, and channel mismatch, sometimes preserving imperfections, sometimes offering an idealized machine that never existed. Other variable mu compressors are not copies of a Fairchild, but they inherit the same broad idea. Let the gain control element change its own slope as the signal pushes deeper into reduction, and make recovery serve the musical phrase rather than a stopwatch. The Fairchild became a legend not because it was perfectly transparent. It is heavy, hot, complicated, maintenance-hungry, and inseparable from the limits of 1950s engineering. That is precisely the point. Narma's design turned those limits into behavior musicians and engineers could use: speed without a hard edge, control without complete stillness, and recovery that seemed to breathe with the program. Long after safer, quieter, and more exact tools arrived, the Fairchild remained desirable because its engineering did more than solve a problem. It helped define a musical language.